Hello, everybody. It's a Hangry Table here. Back with another genre, guys. Hey Lou, hey Lauren.
Cheer yourself up, Hangry.
Well, after Sorcerer and now this movie, I'm more of a depressed table than I am a hangry one. But for those of you who might not know what I'm talking about, we are going to be discussing a film about a wolf named Virginia. Does that sound about right, Lou? Yes, possibly. No, kinda. No. Okay. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? You're cordially invited to George and Martha's for an evening of fun and games. This movie, wow. It's like between this and Sorcerer, I really
I understand in general why you're making that comparison, but this is a totally different kettle of fish by all means.
Yes, but they're depressed fishes.
And it's so bizarre. And I've seen this picture where they put everything in color on the box because the movie is in black and white and should be. And there was a lot of contention with the studio about not making it in color. And this just changes the whole atmosphere of it. Maybe it sold more discs that way, but it's not right. It's not right.
They photoshopped Elizabeth Taylor. This does not.
Yeah, the makeup and hair people worked so hard to make her look older. She put on 20, 30 pounds to do the movie. She was only 32 or 33 at the time they were making this movie. And they tried to make her look young and pretty again in here, let alone sort of with that innocent little "oh, who me" look on her face, which she certainly does not have anywhere in the film.
Would this be considered false advertising? What do you think?
By who?
Yeah, true enough.
All's fair in love and advertising, or something like that.
Very true, very true. Well, Lorn, would you like to give us a little recap on this film?
I think this is a really difficult one to try and do a recap of. So instead of a recap, maybe I'll just set the beginning. And that is you have George and Martha, who are attached to a university. Martha's father, I believe, is the dean, and her husband, George, is a professor in the history department. And they have just attended an evening soiree at her father's behest. They had a pretty good party going there, and the opening credits start with George and Martha walking home. And when they arrive there, finally, it's obvious they've had a few drinks over the night, and it's 2:00 in the morning. George is fairly tired and ready to wind the evening down, but Martha wants to have a few more drinks and then announces that there are guests that are going to be coming. And George is a little shocked by this, that they're going to be entertaining further into the early morning hours. He's not real happy about the fact that this is going to be going on. There's some verbal sparring that goes on between the two, a few little snipes and snips, but also some flirtation. And it's kind of topsy-turvy how they are interacting with each other. It's a little stilted isn't quite the right word, but rehearsed. Well, yes, it's off-putting, but it feels performative and rehearsed. And eventually the guests do arrive. And from there, the evening takes several interesting turns. And I don't really, I don't want to get into those because this is a movie that I think is best seen. I sort of hope we don't discuss spoilers too much.
I agree. Okay. It's a movie you have to let unfold before your very eyes, although we can certainly talk about parts of it and about what it's about.
Yeah,
which I say is it's about love. It may not be love the way you or I or anybody else define it in our own relationships. But when I watch this movie, I think of, you meet couples and you say, how the heck are they a couple? Well, this is how, or one way how. And it's quite a tale. And it was a very successful play on Broadway first, enormously successful. And was scandalous because it takes some very rough edges and has some pretty rough language for the time. And supposedly, when Liz and Dick, the most famous couple in the world, were asked to do it, Burton told Liz, "You're not good enough to do this." And she said, "Yes, I am." And they made it work. So that's kind of interesting. But remember, they were on their own one of the most scandalous couples, because on Cleopatra, which was 2 movies before this for them, they were not married. They were having a very, very open affair. And they were both married to other people at the time, which in 1960 something was pretty scandalous still. So
1966, I believe.
Well, this movie, but I'm saying this is a couple of years before. For
Cleo. Yeah. Sorry.
And what's interesting is that supposedly Edward Albee, who wrote the play, wanted James Mason and Bette Davis for these parts. And the funny thing is, at the very beginning, Martha, Elizabeth Taylor's character, comes into the house, looks around at the dissemblage of their belongings and says, "What a dump," in that classic Bette Davis line, and then has a fight with him over the fact that she can't remember, and he can't either, what Bette Davis movie that is from. And supposedly Albee said, "Wouldn't it have been fun to have Bette Davis doing a Bette Davis impression in the movie?"
That would have been hilarious.
Cooler heads prevailed.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I mean, watching it, it was a tour de force. It was, the performances by Burton and Taylor were fantastic, and you got a real sense that this was a movie that won awards. And yet at the same time, yeah, I see where you're going with this, Lou, about this being a movie about love, but I almost wonder if it's more about the echoes of love and the sort of the void that's left, like sort of the emotions that are left behind when love disappears. Because for the majority of this movie, I'm like, wow, I really hope I don't end up like this with my wife.
Oh, well, and I doubt you or I would. But, we should mention, of course, that the other 2 people in the movie, George Segal and Sandy Dennis, playing the young couple, this movie was nominated. Are you ready? It was for every single category it was eligible for the Oscars, 13. Wow. And it won several. And it was also one of the only movies where the entire cast was nominated in all the categories, because the 4 of them are, in all intents and purposes, the entire cast. There's a scene in a bar with the guy who owns it and his wife, who was actually the gaffer, and I think it was costume or hair person who was his wife, in more or less silent roles. But it's these 4 people all evening long and into the morning, and they run the gamut. And there's a lot of booze and a lot of, I mean, that's one thing, my God. People used to, I mean, not everybody was this, but people drank more back then, the whole cocktail attitude.
Yeah.
And it was also the very first movie ever directed by Mike Nichols, who'd done some theater. And most people don't know that Mike Nichols, his real name was Mikhail Igor Peszkowski.
Oh, my. And
he was born in Berlin. And by the way, when he was a kid, he contracted, I forget what disease it was, and lost all his hair. And ever after that was wearing wigs and fake eyebrows because he was completely bald. So if you've seen him, that charming blonde guy, that's what's underneath. And his family escaped from Germany and wound up in New York. And because his father's middle name, his patronymic, as they call it in Russian, was Nikolaevich, he became Nichols. And there you go. And he directed Barefoot in the Park with Robert Redford and Elizabeth Ashley. And then he did Love and The Odd Couple and won Tony Awards. And Death of a Salesman with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Harold Pinter. And then they asked him, "You want to make a movie?" And he wound up doing this. And after this, of course, his movies, which you probably certainly know, after this was The Graduate, which he won the Academy Award for Best Director for, Catch-22, Carnal Knowledge, Day of the Dolphin, Silkwood, Working Girl, Postcards from the Edge, The Birdcage, Primary Colors, Closers, Charlie Wilson's War, and a few things for television. So, very, very talented guy.
Well, I mean, this was a film, for those who are listening, that came out June 21st, 1966. It was another one of these long films, which we seem to be gravitating towards, over 2 hours. And it was budgeted at $7.5 million, and it ended up making $33.7 million in return. And as Lou had rightly pointed out, it was based very much on the play by Albee. And that play was one which, quote unquote, the dialogue violated the standard moral guidelines for films at that time, including multiple instances of goddamn and son of a bitch and screw you, up yours, monkey and hump the hostess.
I'm surprised you managed to work that into.
Well, you know, it's you got to take notes for these things, right? No. But I mean, all that to be said, it was like this.
And we should talk about that for a minute because there was this thing called the Hayes Production Code, which was named after a guy named Will Hayes, who ran it originally for the motion picture industry. And this was the same code that, for example, said that Lucy and Desi had to have separate beds, that you couldn't say or do certain things in films and TV. And part of the reason why the industry needed one is because up until it began, everybody had their own. You could have a movie that was perfectly okay to play in New York, but not in Boston, because there was the Catholic code, which could officially rate a movie not just X or whatever, but condemned, which meant it was technically a moral sin for a Catholic to go see it. And other towns and cities had their own. And so the code was trying to homogenize it, but they actually broke the code to make this movie. And Jack Warner paid a fine, I think, of $5,000 to do it. And within 2 years, Jack Valenti created the whole RX, PG, or actually, I guess it was G. PG came in later. The rating system to, again, try and make it equal across the country, because to invest in a movie that couldn't play in certain places was, you know, financially stupid. It was also, as I said earlier, a big controversy about doing it in black and white. When the official cinematographer who was assigned to it originally by Warner Brothers, I'm trying to remember who it was, but when he said, well, how about we shoot it in color and you can always release it in black and white? And the director said, no way. So they got Haskell Wexler, who we now know, but who we didn't know then, who won the Oscar for the best cinematographer, black and white, because that was the last year when they gave two separate cinematography awards, one for black and white and one for color. Uh-huh. And so at that point, they went crazy about it for quite a while. There were all kinds of controversies involved in this, of course. And it was Harry Stradling who was the original cinematographer. Anyway.
And it's funny to hear you talk about controversy because, I mean, the list of names, the list of words that I read out just now elicited a bit of a chuckle. And frankly, in this day and age, I would expect the latest Netflix kids cartoon to be seriously called Monkey Nichols or something, right? But at the time, this was just sort of like out of
vulgar,
like, out of the pale. Yeah, no, like the equivalent of, I guess, you know, XXX rated blue movies playing up on the screen. And so it's sort of incredible how far we've come, I suppose, in terms of.
Well, bear in mind that a lot of this was for the shock value itself. You know, this was in a way a pie in the face to the sanitized image of the American family of the 50s for the decade before, and I think that was part of the intent of the piece.
This was the first real punch in the face to the idea of the nuclear couple, the nuclear family being the default, from what I understand.
Well, supposedly, as I mentioned to you before we began, they sat the executives down to look at a rough cut without music. And a Life magazine reporter was there, and he printed the following quote from one of the studio chiefs, quote, "My God, we've got a $7 million dirty movie on our hands." They were scared. They really were. But Albee insisted and Nichols insisted. And so, you know, they got what they wanted. And then, of course, there's the whole question of Liz and Dick. They were, again, the most famous people on the planet, basically, at that point.
Yeah.
And I think as great as she is, and she really is better than anything she's ever done before in this movie, that he's even better.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's easy to see her, who's played beautiful, strong, but maybe more demure women, come up to this level of vulgarity and hard edge and exaggeration. But to see somebody who basically played really, really strong men play this relatively weak one who still has some smarts underneath all of that, I think that's harder and even more fun to watch happen.
I don't know that I would characterize him as weak. I think he's playing weak.
Well, okay.
I think that's part of, you're arguing that it's a love story. And I think that in a way you're right, but I think that it's easy to miss that he's playing this part for her so that she can cope and continue to live. She's filled with self-loathing, and she uses that to attack him, and he just takes it. He takes it because he loves her, and she knows it. And that scene where she comes apart and explains that she loves him, and that's half of why she hates him, it's something.
And I mean, it's never. Actually, wait. If I say this, it's going to be going into spoiler territory. So I think I'll pull back on that.
Yeah, you got to be careful. But there's one other point that I would make here, which I think is why you can sell this as a love story, because it very much does not look like that while you're watching it. And again, without getting into the crucial plot point, you have these two couples. You have George and Martha, and you have Nick and Honey. And Nick and Honey appear to be the new, young nuclear couple who are in love, but they manifestly are not. Of the two couples, Nick and Honey, there is no love between them at all.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And that's not readily apparent. And what's interesting about that is that couple had the opportunity to have what they so very much wanted and chose, well, one of them chose not to. And I think both couples would kill to have what the others do. Yes.
There is in addition to the individual competitions between the various people going on, there is the A team and the B team competing with each other in a way.
Yeah.
And it's just when you think you're sort of figuring it out, then it'll play some games with you. And of course, the other thing about making a movie of a play, in the play, it all took place in their house, primarily in their living room. In the movie, they have to, quote unquote, open it up as Hollywood does. And so they went to Smith College because basically Nichols liked it and liked the look of it as being that classic New England campus. And Smith College told them, look, we don't want to be a circus. We're happy to do it. We're happy to take the money. But you cannot bring any press here because the whole place will be full of paparazzi because it's Liz and Dick. And they got into trouble with that, and the campus threatened to kick them out. And but it all kind of works. You get this sense of, you might wonder why these people are all kind of hanging together. It's because they're in their own little sort of academia ghetto. They're in their own little world where who the dean is and who the chairman of the department is and whatever is a whole political universe all its own and separate from the real world out there, which when you think about it is one of the things that's wrong, especially with higher education, especially now, but even then, which is it's supposedly preparing people to go out and have careers in the real world, but it's preparing them in such a cloister, in such a nunnery, if you will, of separation from the real world, and in such an elitism that they leave there entirely educated and utterly unprepared. And these people are part of the machine that does that.
And it's oh, sorry, go on, Lorn.
No, you started. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's interesting too, because as you alluded to, Lou, at the beginning of this conversation, Liz Taylor's father is the dean of the university. And whenever he's referred to, especially by her, it's basically as if he is God of their little bubble in their little world. And so that kind of brings it home, the fact that they really are in this literal, well, not literally, but figurative ivory tower.
In their own little kingdom, you might say.
Yeah.
And of course, the implication is that Burton is with her because that keeps his tenure, so to speak, within the situation, when in fact, what we learn is that George Segal is with Honey because Honey's dad had money. And so, and that's not really a spoiler. That's just, it just shows you how the dimensions shift from one place to another during this show.
Well, the entire movie is a knife fight. And at first, it's very unusual because you don't quite understand why are these initially with George and Martha? There's some viciousness there.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, at the beginning, but it starts off as this could be playful viciousness. It's a little hard to tell, but it very quickly develops a very real edge. And at first, especially in the first act, you're watching Nick and Honey react to this because they're having to see this. It begins immediately as soon as they arrive. And you put yourself in the role of these guests who have arrived at this home who don't really know these people and are immediately subjected to this, what's obviously an ongoing verbal fight that has apparently been going on for most of their marriage. And you're trying, first of all, to pretend that maybe you don't notice. And then secondly, you're trying to excuse yourself and escape, and yet the hosts won't let you. And
if you think about it, if it wasn't for who her father is, they probably would have said when they were invited, no, thanks, but it's late. We'll come see you another time. But they felt like they were obligated because we should explain, not only are they, he's actually in the biology department, although they keep intentionally misstating that as the math
department.
He's brand new there. They're the new couple in the faculty. And so they feel a certain obligation to do well. Being drunk at 2 a.m. at somebody's house, I guess that's what they do here. Let's play along. And when they get there, they realize they're an audience for a gladiator fight that's been going on that they were not prepared for. And then they aren't allowed to just be an audience. They are drawn into it. And that is the part that's really insidious. And like you say, if you or I were there, we'd say, thanks a lot, we're leaving.
Yeah, I know.
But they feel like they can't because they might offend Daddy by walking out on his wife. And so the pressures, there's a lot going on in this movie.
At a certain point, I would have been like, I will take the risk of offending Daddy and leave. Like, I mean,
hold on. This is leading into, I think, what is the other crucial part about the film, which is that it's about ambition. And that is the rising ambitions of Nick and Honey, and also the stifled and crumbled and completely deteriorated ambitions of both Martha and Martha. George and Martha, yes.
Yeah, and you know that George had some and basically found a place where I could rise to this level and no higher because, as Martha keeps telling him, you're in the department, but you don't run the department. You couldn't even get that far. Yeah. And he's basically made his peace with it in kind of a sullen and disgruntled way. It's these people are playing games they have been playing probably their entire marriage. And they get more vicious because they have to keep adding something new. Yeah. And then there's the part we won't tell you because it would be a spoiler about their biggest game and how Martha breaks the rules and eventually gets punished for it. Really breaks the cardinal rule. And it's partly because George realizes that game is a dead end and is not going anywhere and is actually getting in the way of them moving forward. But again, they've got an audience. So, hey, let's put on a show.
You know what? Now that you verbalize that, Lou, I kind of that's let a few things kind of click in place for me about that. Because that big spoiler / what have you, it was again one of those things at first blush. You watch it and you're thinking like, oh, okay, like you kind of get an idea of where this is going, and then when they confirm it, you think, all right, well, I guess that makes sense. But that's interesting that it's something that was getting in the way, and that in fact, although unwanted, it was ultimately necessary for their weird relationship to, I guess, continue on. And I realize I'm speaking very much in generalities here right now because I don't want to spoil it. But no, that helps me a little bit. Thank you, Lou.
You're welcome.
This is a movie that I don't know that I can say that I like it. Yeah. I like there's some brilliant dialogue and everybody acts their hearts out. And I think this is a movie that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. But I think what I took out of the movie is that I have been in the bad relationship before. And what it put on the screen that I saw that I recognized from my own bad relationship is that you can love somebody. And yet when things are not working, when things do go bad, the things that may once have endeared you to somebody now become irritants. And they can become a thing that festers and that you use to attack and to be attacked with. And that's when you know the relationship is going bad. And yet so many times people stay in those relationships because they think this is what we have to do. This is part of it. This is just what you do. And I think what I took out of this is that when you love somebody, you have to accept all the things, the little things, the small things. You have to be able to see those in that person and forgive those things and be able to get along with each other over the small things. If you can do that over the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. If you can't do that, it's going to fester and things are going to turn out worse. And I think that's what this movie displays.
In fact, if I can get away from the movie, but to that point a little bit, I will share an anecdote that is true and that gives you an idea. Somebody I know very well, and I'll just leave it at that, was married for 20 some odd years to somebody who was an absolute, makes Martha look like Betty Crocker, psycho crazy lady.
Wow.
And knew it and hated it and persisted. Now, as it happens, this gentleman who I know is an airline pilot. And when he finally decided to get divorced, part of his benefits from the airline were seeing a shrink about his situation. And the shrink told him this, which I thought was fascinating. He said, I see this every day. What do you mean? Well, it's part of what you do for a living. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you're flying along and suddenly the engines stop, you don't just say, well, I guess we're going to crash and give up. You keep looking for, is it the fuel tank? Is it this? Is it that? All the way to the ground. It is ingrained in you not to give up or what you perceive as giving up and to try and somehow fix it. And if it's unfixable, that will make you crazy for 20 years. And thank God you finally had enough or you got courage enough to walk away. So people do that, not just as airline pilots, but in all walks of life and professions. And that's kind of what this movie's about too, is, it's like, it may be a lousy relationship, but it's the only one I've got. And by God, I'm going to fight for it tooth and nail, even if it means destroying it.
And I think you are right. George and Martha do love each other. It is a very bizarre love, but when you understand what it is that has come between them, it begins to make a lot more sense.
Yeah. And by the way, you could bring up that visual of that book, if you would, Hangry. There is a great book about this show, about the play, about the people, about the making of the movie, and about the era and the context of this whole sort of New York theatrical intellectual society in which this story came. And it's called Cocktails with George and Martha, Movies, Marriage, and the Making of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by a guy named Philip Gefter. And one of the things the book reveals, there was a real couple that Woolf or Albee knew and who this was patterned after. They weren't college people, they were art people, if I remember right. But it's kind of interesting where he got his ideas and where this all came from. And it, as people have said, this movie ended the Ricky and Lucy ideal marriage media.
Lucy, I'm home.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, Taylor and Burton divorced, remarried, divorced again in real life. So, there's a little art imitating life, imitating art, vice versa. And somebody else said it helped introduce Freudian psychology to the mainstream. And that's all about that spoiler we don't want to blow.
Right.
But Sigmund Freud's Future of Illusion, the central thesis was, quote, illusions need not necessarily be false. And Albee said that was a touchstone of his when he was writing the play. And then some people said that there was a metaphor for homosexual relationships because Albee was gay. But, and by the way, the name, he saw that on a bathroom wall in Greenwich Village. Somebody wrote that. It had nothing to do with the author, Virginia Woolf, of course. It was a play on the song from The Three Little Pigs. So here we are, 6 Degrees of Walt Disney once again. And this person writing this story I'm reading says, Freud would certainly have something to say about that it came from a Greenwich Village bathroom. Anyway.
Well, to follow on that, so Albee said that they were based on two friends, married New York socialites, Willard Mass and Mary Mencken. Mass was a professor of literature at Wagner College, and Mencken was an experimental filmmaker and painter.
That was it, yeah.
And they were known for their infamous salons where drinking would commence at 4 p.m. on Friday and end in the wee hours of night on Monday.
Tommy,
these people drank in those days. I mean, all of those sort of men in the gray flannel suit era movies. Well, look at Mad Men.
Yeah.
They drank and drank and drank and drank and drank, maybe because they didn't have access legally or otherwise to more serious drugs, but they, oh boy, did they drink. It's interesting that the music, which is sparing but very, very gentle, and Alex North did the music, and that Warner Brothers released a 2 LP soundtrack that included the entire film's dialogue in addition to the music.
Really?
So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I guess it sold because it was a huge success, this movie. I mean, people were partly, frankly, because it was kind of a scandal cause celeb, because people said, oh, I got to go see that. I hear it's edgy and different and dirty and whatever. But anyway.
Was there any kind of an effort to boycott it or to shut it down?
Well, the studio talked a lot to the Catholic diocese and their board, and they got a somewhat morally objectionable. It was kind of a back off from the absolute condemnation.
Well, given the final scene of the movie, leading up to the final scene, I could see where they might have some objection. Yes,
indeed. I think, by the way, that this is one of the best opening ups of a play ever done, as far as the stuff that was shot on location. And then that house, that whole outside of the house with the swing and the conversations out there, that was all on the stage. That was all on the sound stage. In fact, the stage I know very well at Warner Brothers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, good old Stage 8, which was also, as I've mentioned, I think on some of these somewhere, that was the stage where Rick's Cafe Americain was way back when. And I know because one day climbing around in the flies, I found a call sheet from Casablanca stuffed in a hole up there. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So talk about, if these walls could speak, so to speak. The other movie at that period, by the way, that led Jack Valenti, who was the head of the MPAA, and who got his job through courtesy of some guy named Wasserman, who had pull with LBJ, and Valenti used to work for LBJ and then moved on to the movie business. But anyway, the other movie of that time that helped was Blow Up by Michelangelo Antonioni, which is a more visually edgy film, I guess you'd say, because there's some sort of semi-nudity in it and things like that. But they officially paid a $5,000 fine to the MPAA to leave the words alone, and it earned $14.5 million domestically, which was the third highest grossing movie of 1966. So it did very well.
I wanted to ask another little trivia question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to it, but it was at the beginning of the movie when she's trying to remember the name of the Bette Davis movie that she's pulled the "What a Dump" line from. They mentioned several times all of the epic Warner Brothers movies that have been produced. And I just wondered, was that a little bit of side advertising for the studio, or was that
it was in the stage show, I think, but it certainly couldn't hurt, because Jack Warner was very personally involved in all those movies and in this one. So
it felt very much like product placement. I just heard Warner Brothers an awful lot of times.
Those movies were not running constantly on TV the way that they did since then. So I don't know. Maybe.
Hangry, what I wanted to know from you, because I was really interested in your reaction to this movie. I was pretty sure you probably hadn't seen it before.
I had not.
And I wanted to know, honestly, I wondered if you would make it through this one. I thought there was a possibility you might have considered turning it off.
Yeah, well, it's we might as well go into our whole what we liked and what we disliked about the film. In my case, watching this, I broke it up over a couple of evenings as these things go, because I don't find that I have much time to do a full 2.5 hour or 2 hour and 20 minute sit down. But throughout the week, I was getting progressively more depressed as I was watching this, because it is just like there are just parts of this that are vicious. And anyone who's ever been in a relationship or who's gotten into a fight with their significant other, you can see a bit of that in there. And it's not, it's the stuff that you don't want to think about when you're in a relationship. Like this is the movies are what you try to, like, you're trying to escape the stuff that they were showing in this movie, essentially. Right. So, thankfully my wife and I weren't fighting this week.
Well, the reason I'm chuckling is very early in our marriage, our relationship, my wife and I bought one of those faux barnwood with faux barbed wire hanger signs that they sell at Cracker Barrel with pithy sayings.
Yeah.
And I always tell everybody's thinking getting married that this is the best marital advice I can give them. And it hangs in our bedroom, as it has in every master bedroom in every house we've been in for 20 some odd years. And it says, it's this movie. It just occurred to me. It says, don't go to bed mad, stay up and fight.
Yeah. Jeez, that's.
But of course, that presumes that once you fight it out, you get over it. These people don't get over anything, and haven't for however many years.
So, I mean, going back to what you were saying, Lauren, in my case, I liked the performances. I thought Richard Burton was fantastic.
Amazing. Amazing.
Like you could see Elizabeth Taylor was doing really well, and she really like you said, acted her heart out. But I don't know, like I was almost getting like Russell Crowe vibes from Richard Burton at some point. And I don't know if I was crazy or just,
you could make that comparison, I think, but the other way, I'd say Russell Crowe has Richard Burton vibes if I was doing it.
Fair enough.
And not just chronologically. Well, consider his performance here compared to the one in Where Eagles Dare that we did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
was a fine film and fun, but it was much later, and he had become much more drunk and much more not as concerned about his art. And this is a guy, man, what he does in this movie is spectacular. It's truly spectacular.
If I wouldn't have believed this was the same guy as in Where Eagles Dare. Like I don't think I've ever seen an actor like this before. Like this performance was just incredible. And the fact that he didn't get the Oscar for it, I think was really unfortunate in that particular year. So like that, I think Richard Burton stole the show for me. What I didn't like too much about the film, I wasn't that much of a fan of the two secondary characters. I thought Honey was a little bit too much, particularly. And I get maybe that was intentional, but just apart from the movie being very bleak in some ways and being very intense and not in a good way. But it's interesting though, because as I was watching this, at first you get uncomfortable. You're like, ugh, like you feel like the guests, you feel like the two people, Honey and her husband, who show up, and you're in front of this couple that's just sniping at each other. And we've all been there where, you're at a house party or you have people over and the husband says to the wife or the wife says to the husband some offhand remark that has deeper meaning, and it cuts deeper than it should, and you see the reaction. And that's how it kind of begins, but then it just keeps getting worse and worse and like more intense and more volatile. And after a while, you got kind of swept up in the emotions of it, and you can feel anger on both sides. Like you start to, I don't know, go along with the insanity away. And so for a movie to be able to do that and to kind of suck you in like that, I got to say that was really impressive and disturbing. So that's the best that I got. That's not a very clear cut what I liked, what I disliked about it. I liked that I disliked it, I suppose. That makes sense. Okay. I hope that answered your question.
I'd like to key off of what you said, because my dislike is yours, and that is Sandy Dennis. I understand the character is written to be kind of a strange, quirky lady, but I think she took quirk a little too damn far.
Yeah.
No
one is that drunk.
Well, not only is no one that drunk, no one is that desperate to marry the girl with the money to be George Segal and get stuck with her.
Yeah.
She has so few redeeming values to my eye.
Remember though, there's another reason why he married her, which is not related to the money. And I think that had more to do with it.
That baby bump.
Yeah.
Oh, right. The
Hysterical pregnancy. Yeah.
Which is hilarious. I've never heard of that term before. Like, was that a thing? Did that really happen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
I think my favorite thing, I'm going to mirror you, Hangry, and say that I think Burton's performance is incredible. It's the best performance of his, I think, that I've ever seen. I also agree Sandy Dennis is the weak point. But there's one other thing that I thought of as I was watching this movie, and this is, again, a personal anecdote. There was one time at which I remember going with some friends to a party, and a couple of these friends were married to each other. And at the time, I don't think anybody else was aware that they were going through marital difficulties. And so the husband of this couple was kind of a loudmouth jackass, but he was a level kind of a loudmouth jackass. He was a buddy of mine, but he liked to be a loudmouth and smart off. And I was kind of a younger kid at the time. And he was being a loudmouth smartass, and he ordered me, he says, "Go get me a beer out of the fridge." So I decided, okay, smartass. And I went and I got the beer out of the fridge, and before I handed it to him, I shook it. And I handed it to him, and he opened the bottle cap and got a face full of beer. And the next thing I knew, he had come over the table and knocked me into the couch, and he had his hands around my neck.
Wow.
God.
And everybody was shocked. And I was so shocked, I didn't even realize what had happened. I just remember saying to him, it's me. And gradually I saw his eyes go back to non-crazed, and he let go and he backed off, and everybody was a little shocked, and the party broke up. And we all left, and everybody thought, well, God, that was really weird. Later, we discovered, that he was under all of this stress from the marital difficulties, and they had a bad night, and that so in that sense, it's like I've seen these kind of things happen in relationships.
You've seen these people before, yeah.
It affects things in weird ways and in ways that you wouldn't expect, and I think that that's what this movie shows, is that these things happen, and they're raw, and they're vicious, and they're hurtful, and that's just life. And I think what the movie is about is, how do you cope with it when it happens?
Yeah.
I would like to point something out that's occurred to me this evening. Of all the movies we've done on all different types of stories and all different actors and all different situations, this one, love it or hate it, has drawn more personal anecdotes and experiences out of the three of us than any other movie. And I think that may be the ultimate tribute to why it is such a lasting, love it or hate it, artistic triumph, because it makes you reevaluate your own life and the lives of people you know and the relationships of people you know against this, and brings out some truths, granted not as exaggerated and as theatrical, I guess is the word, as this movie, but there's something going on here that's pretty darn powerful. And it really did change the entire point of view about romance and about love and about marriages, from that, everybody's happy and we all have a happily ever after ending, to something a little closer to what really goes on when everybody goes home and the doors close. So that's saying a lot, but it's true. It really is true.
Should we be concerned that this is the movie we all relate the most to?
I didn't say we related necessarily personally, although, what did I send you guys? God, I'd have to go look. But the other day, I can just summarize it, but I sent a little message to everybody. For those who don't know, all of us on all these channels have kind of a back channel chat room or series of rooms. And I sent everybody something about something that really happened, which was the other day, my wonderful wife, who is not Martha by any stretch of the imagination, but she came over and just hugged me out of the blue, which is so nice. And I'm so glad she did. But she did that, and I said, "Oh, thank you." And she said, "Well, I just want you to know how much I love you." I said, "I do." And I said, "And I love you." And she said, "Even when I'm a pain in the ass and crazy and angry?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "That's part of your charm." And she laughed. And I said, "Not a great part, not a vital part, but it's part of it." So here it is. Yeah. I said, "Not a big part, not an important part, but still." And we both laughed together about it. And I guess maybe a lot of people went to see this movie, and the message they walked away from it with was, well, we may have our faults and our problems, but we're not as bad as those crazy people. So.
Well,
So in that sense, it was an upbeat picture for a lot of people watching it.
I guess this is the literal definition of glass half empty or glass half full, depending on how you look at it.
I suppose, yeah. Well, but I there have been times when I've recommended some of these and you've said, oh gosh, I wish I didn't have to, but I hope you enjoyed it in spite of what are absolutely valid criticisms, as of course we will our future ones. And I think we should make a little announcement here.
Okay.
Those of you who, thank you, are members of the channel and get this exclusively, there are two things I want to point out. In one, I go back and read the comments on the ones we did weeks and months ago, because it's now been, a few months.
Yeah.
And I saw a comment the other day that said, well, how can I see this? I'm not a member. How come I'm able to look at it? Well, the answer is, yeah, you are one. You just didn't know you were one. Because thanks to the gracious generosity of so many good people, when we do the pro show, people donate memberships and they get handed out to people in the chat. And a lot of people aren't aware they got it. Yep. And I think it's important that you know that, only because, aside from the fact that, hey, there's all this stuff you could be watching that you didn't know you could. The next thing that happens after you get a freebie membership like that from some generous person is you've got the membership, hooray, but it's for a month. And after that month, you suddenly get basically a nice bill from YouTube saying, hey, it's time to renew your membership. Give us whatever it is, a couple of bucks. Yeah. And I wouldn't want you to think that we're somehow, sneakily trying to get money out of you that way. I hope you find enough value in it to keep the membership, and you should. But just be aware that you might be a member and not even know it, and some of your friends may not. And when you're in the chat, you might get a membership out of the blue. Secondly, we have a whole new channel now that is the That Park Place podcast channel, or as Jonas likes to call it, 3PPO or something. I forget how it comes out. And some of the content there is going to be, after things have been member only here, these shows will then move there for free if you're a subscriber over there. So we expect the word to get out even further about the Genre Guys that way. Mm-hmm. And we're thrilled about that. And by the way, I haven't brought this up with you guys yet, but I was thinking what we need to do is go back and number all the episodes so people can say, oh, I've seen episode 1, 2, and 3, but I think I missed 4, and know what they're missing, so to speak. So there's a little overhaul we might want to try.
Yeah, no, all very good points. And so all that to be said, we are very grateful. We are grateful for your eyeballs. We are grateful for your attention. We are grateful for you taking the time to listen to this, and leave us your comments down below. That is what we feed on. Like Lou, I like to go back as well and look at previous comments and see what people have been saying and respond to them too, if necessary. We also want to find out more about what you like about this, what you dislike. Are there movies that you'd like us to cover? Are there things that you think we absolutely must speak about? Tell us. A lot of this is driven by your reaction. And so do not be shy. Give us those comments. Give us that feedback.
And if you love it, tell everybody. If you hate it, don't say a word to anybody.
Exactly. And on that note,
I would just say, let's do a little sneak preview of.
Well, yeah, I was going to say we're, this has been a very
going somewhere
cosmic
completely
week.
Different next time, gang.
This has been a cosmic
week. It is a little
week.
long. I'm sorry about that, but okay. It is in some ways a sequel that is better than the original, and the original is an admitted classic. And when I say better, what I mean is it carries the story forward and answers a lot of the questions the original left open. But to my mind, more importantly, although it's much less visually artistic, although it's certainly no slouch in that department either, it is more down to earth, which is a funny thing to say about a movie called 2010, The Year We Make Contact, which is our old pal Roy Scheider, along with John Lithgow and Helen Mirren. And they're going to go back and find out what happened to Hal and Dave and the pod doors and all the rest of it. And what they find.
Space fetus.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one way to put it. Yes. But it's a pretty wonderful movie, I think, and I hope you think so too. And next week, same bat time, same bat station, we'll be in outer space with the I forget what the Russian ship's name is. But anyway, we'll be going back to the Discovery and see what we discover.
Yep. And the funny thing is, I was going to make a crack that this has already happened 14 years ago.
That's right. That's right. I hadn't thought of it. Oh, golly. The future was going to be such a great place. What the heck did we do to screw it up? But
anyway, everyone, hope you all have a wonderful week ahead, whatever may be coming your way. And we will hopefully see you here next time.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.